Hi, I'm Nicole Crowley with another episode of Science is Appealing. Today I'm on Long Island, no stranger to hurricanes. The atmospheric conditions right now are calm, but if a hurricane were to hit, there's a chance that the whole island could be submerged underwater. Some say that there might not even be enough time for everyone to get off.
Once they get involved in the upper atmospheric jet streams, they do move at a very rapid rate, and that reduces the amount of time that people have to monitor the system, get ready, and activate a plan if they have a plan.
I mean, when the water comes in, there's really nowhere you can go. People have to remember that. Imagine a yardstick, 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet. That cube, seawater, weighs 1,700 pounds. So imagine that water is moving in. You have wave after wave after wave of these 1,700-pound blocks battering the shore. And it's not just the shoreline. When you end up with a Category 3 hurricane, or God help us, a Category 4 hurricane, those waves are going to go miles inland. And there are actually places that are north of Sunrise Highway that are going to be underwater. And there are a few places where the Long Island Expressway passes over canals and rivers where the Long Island Expressway is actually underwater from a major hurricane.
We're overdue, and that's the message that I'd like to convey.
I'm in Amity Harbor, and if a hurricane Category 3 hits, the water surges could be well above 29 feet.
Most people, they're obviously not, some folks remember the 1938, but the folks that are living here probably aren't old enough or don't remember the 1938 or didn't live in here during that time frame, and it's only in history. So there's an incredible complacency that exists. And one of our roles here in NOAA is to try and educate people that these things have happened in the past and they can happen in the future.
Long Island is overdue for a Category 3 hurricane, a force so strong that it can result in massive power outages, tree and soil loss, homes destroyed, and lives lost. It is because we are working off an expired clock that it's important to know the 411 on hurricanes. First, a hurricane is an intense tropical weather system with a well-defined circulation and maximum sustained winds of 74 miles per hour or higher. And according to meteorologist Ross Dickman, there is a specific time of the year in the Northeast that we consider hurricane season.
Our season typically runs from late August until maybe early October up here in the Northeast.
It is during this time period that Long Island is most likely to get a hurricane. And for 2011, NOAA predicts a 70% probability that the Atlantic Basin will have between 7 to 10 hurricanes with winds of 74 miles per hour or higher, and 3 to 5 major hurricanes that are Category 3, 4, or 5 with winds at least 111 miles per hour. If you look at this map, it shows places that hurricanes have hit. And if you take a closer look at the Long Island Sound area from 1851 to 2003, you can see how many hurricanes have crisscrossed all points on the island. This map shows how many hurricanes have passed within 75 miles of Montauk. On average, our local area is impacted by a hurricane around every 15 years. One of the worst hurricanes to hit Long Island was the 1938 Long Island Express hurricane, which was responsible for peak sustained winds of 121 miles per hour, gusting to 186. The peak wave heights were 50 feet, or the equivalent to a wall of water as high as a 5-story building. Approximately 2 billion trees were destroyed. 3,300 boats lost, nearly 9,000 homes and buildings were destroyed, and 700 people perished.
Some folks remember the 1938, but folks that are living here probably aren't old enough or don't remember the 1938 or didn't live in here during that time frame, and it's only in history. So there's an incredible complacency that exists. And one of our roles here in NOAA is to try and educate people that these things have happened in the past and they can happen in the future.
All this death and destruction was the result of a Category 3 hurricane. The facts are that a Category 3 hurricane hits every 70 years. The 1938 Long Island Express was a Category 3 hurricane. This means Long Island is 3 years past due for a Category 3 or higher hurricane. Long Island cannot afford to be complacent. We must know what to expect and how to deal with a hurricane when one does hit.
People should be worried about any hurricane or tropical storm. Think about the damage that you see in a prolonged nor'easter. And a nor'easter is obviously insignificant compared to a hurricane as far as the winds and the wave damage. So if we get a fairly strong hurricane, a Category 2 for example, or even a regular hurricane, Category 1, with the wind knocking down the power lines, trees crossing the road, and of course any structures right along the beach are going to take a hit, that is essentially going to slow the economy down for at least several days. A Category 3 could essentially halt the economy for about a month. And that's the thing people don't realize, I think, is that they think, all right, I've got my extra bread, I've got my extra milk, I've got a generator, I've got my plywood, I can survive the hit from a hurricane, and then we'll go back to business as usual. Well, if there are trees across the roads and power lines are down, maybe where you work is not open for a couple of weeks. Are you sure you're going to get that paycheck? What if you run out of food? Is your local grocery store, your farm stand, going to be able to get food delivered so then you can go and get it? What if, God forbid, you get hurt trying to clean up? Maybe you're cutting trees or something off your property and you cut yourself. Well, if you can't drive to the hospital, are you sure there's going to be a helicopter there ready to take you? So these are the kinds of things I think people don't realize. Even away from the coast, the damage caused by hurricanes essentially stops transportation and what you normally take for granted in our business as usual economy.
The Great Storm of 1693 caused the cut of Fire Island off of Long Island, and in 1893, Hog Island was completely submerged underwater, an island off of Long Island. What category hurricane do you think would cause all of Long Island to be submerged underwater?
Well, due to some of the elevations on Long Island are actually over 200 feet, so it's essentially impossible for any hurricane to submerge all of Long Island. However, much of the insured coastal property is right around sea level or just a few feet above. So again, even a Category 1 or Category 2 hurricane is going to cause billions of dollars of damage potentially. And the latest estimates are just in Suffolk County alone that if we were to have a Category 3 hurricane, we're looking at potentially up to $40 or $50 billion in damage. And Fire Island National Seashore is essentially underwater in a Category 1 or 2 hurricane, at least during the storm. And as the waters recede, you'd see it again. So I don't think we're going to see a Hog Island situation in that case. Historically, there haven't been Category 5, so at this point we're not anticipating that's going to happen. But honestly, we don't need a Category 5. If we get hit with a 3, which was a Hurricane Katrina strength storm, that's going to be devastating. I can't even think of what would happen in Category 4 or even a Category 5. So really, it's places that are away from the water and places that are higher up. But again, that's not just the water that's going to be the problem. No matter how high up you are, even if you stay dry, if trees come down on your house and trees knock down the power lines and there are trees across the road so you can't get to work, can't get to the grocery store, you can't get to a hospital. So no one's really safe if there's another hurricane, even if in fact they don't get wet from the hurricane.
Considering most people on the island haven't experienced a major hurricane, in which ways do you think we're prepared for it and we're not prepared for it?
Well, I think New Yorkers pride themselves on being tough. We're definitely tough people, which I think is great. But sometimes you can be a little stubborn when you're tough. And I think the issue facing us now is that the last hurricane to hit was in 1991, Hurricane Bob. The last really big hurricane was '85, Hurricane Gloria. So for example, when I teach about this in my classes, most of my students, because they're 19 or 20 years old, they don't remember Hurricane Gloria. And they remember Hurricane Bob, which technically missed Long Island. It just clipped Montauk. In fact, I started working here right after Hurricane Bob. I remember traveling here and seeing the trees down, and I thought to myself, wow, we were actually on what's called the good side of Hurricane Bob, the west side, which the winds are a lot weaker, and it looks like a disaster area here. And that was a Category 2 that missed. So I think the younger people don't have a sense of what a hurricane could do. Older people, I think, have a sense of what hurricanes can do, so they may be more prepared. But again, the population is increasing, and it's increasing along the coast. So the question is, are residents going to heed the warnings early enough? And then even if they do, because of the congestion around here, are we going to be able to get those people to safety soon enough? Because what happens with hurricanes along the East Coast is they get caught up in the jet stream, so they start moving much faster. Like the hurricane of 38 may have been moving at 60, 70 miles per hour. That doesn't give you as much time. When a hurricane's approaching Florida, we may have several days where we can warn people. For the Northeast, it might be 24 hours, maybe 36 hours. And by then, they'll have shut down the ferries, the bridges, and the tunnels, so you really would not be able to get off the island. You would just have to move inland. And in fact, Suffolk County Community College, our campuses, would be safe zones for people to come to because we're well inland.
We like to tell people one of the things that they can do right now is to develop a plan, communicate that plan with family members, because they may not have a lot of time to be able to react. Hopefully, if something, God forbid, ever happened up in this area, we will have an opportunity to track it over a long distance and help people see that in the future. But more often than not, a lot of the systems that affect the Northeast United States may not manifest themselves right away. They could be developing right off the Carolina coastline and then get caught up. So just imagine a Friday afternoon on a Labor Day holiday weekend, and everybody goes home on a Friday. Well, you could have a system develop and move across the area in a couple days, and people may not be aware, the situation awareness may be reduced. So have a plan, know what to do, listen during the tropical weather season.
You want to have a lot of fresh water supply. You want to have canned goods so they don't go bad. Maybe even right before a hurricane comes, fill up your tubs with fresh water to have another extra water source. Certainly have a generator. Now, if you have trees that are right next to your house that could potentially cause damage, although I hesitate to tell people to cut down a tree because we need trees. They're beautiful and they actually remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, which is a good thing. If a tree is going to fall on your house, if you know that during a nor'easter that tree is already kind of banging away a little bit at the house, you might consider taking the tree down. And that's really, and plywood. A lot of people will put plywood on their windows and the average person thinks they're protecting the glass. You're not protecting the glass. What happens is if your windows break in a hurricane, then the air rushes into the house. It actually lifts off the roof and then the walls collapse. So it's as if the roof is holding the walls and the wall is holding the roof. So plywood on windows is one way to maybe make your house a little bit safer. But again, it depends on the code that your house was built to. Newer houses have a much stronger code than the older houses.
Where do people go when they're evacuated, and what happens to those people in nursing homes, hospitals, and jails?
Well, that's a good question. Again, you probably have to talk to emergency management experts, but certainly schools and colleges and universities are areas of safe zones that they will ask people to evacuate to. But you can't force somebody to leave their house, unfortunately. And we even saw that with Katrina, that there were some people who were capable of leaving who chose not to. And again, my fear is that because hurricanes are not that common on Long Island, and because New Yorkers pride themselves on being tough, maybe we might have an attitude that, you know what, we're going to ride this thing out. I rode this thing out in Bob, I rode this thing out in Gloria, and we're okay. But if a Katrina or an Andrew or some storm like that comes, there's really not much you can do. Tough is not going to save you in those cases. It's going to kill you.
Do we have ample escape coastal routes to get off Long Island?
Well, there really are no evacuation plans to get people off the island in general. If you're on the South Shore and you notice those blue signs that say, hurricane or coastal evacuation route, those are more for people who are directly in the path of a hurricane right on the South Shore or on Fire Island National Seashore. Those are the people they want to get inland. But the main population centers on Long Island, essentially, they're just going to tell you to hunker down in an inland, high elevated location and ride out the storm and hope it's not too bad in the days and weeks afterward. But again, think about the traffic during a normal rush hour day. Now imagine a major hurricane is coming and you've got like 4 times the rush hours. So you're going to be in gridlock on highways, bridges, tunnels. So that's why emergency officials are actually going to close these down, because you don't want 200 cars sitting on the George Washington Bridge. They're going to get blown off by a hurricane. You don't want hundreds of people in their vehicles on a ferry that's going to be capsized in the Sound. You don't want people entering the Midtown Tunnel when it could flood. So those things are actually going to be closed. You're not going to be allowed to leave in those situations.
Again, there is essentially no plan to get everyone off the island. Even more worrisome is the fact that there is a connection between global warming and the intensity and frequency of hurricanes.
I think something that's very important for people to understand is that it's clear from the scientific evidence that humans are warming the planet, primarily because we're dumping just billions and billions of tons of carbon dioxide into the air and other what we call greenhouse gases that trap the heat. So it's kind of like we're adding blankets on. The more blankets you add on at night, the hotter you're going to get. To kind of put the things into perspective, if you think of during the height of the Gulf oil spill, you imagine a barrel of oil, one of those big black barrels of oil filled with oil. At the height of the Gulf oil spill, there were 40,000 of those barrels spilling into the Gulf every single day. So the weight of those 40,000, think about that, it's a lot. Well, every single day, just from driving cars, flying planes, running coal plants, just fossil fuels based economy, every single day we put about 8,000 Gulf oil spills worth of weight of CO2. So 8,000. Okay, so that traps heat, the planet's warming. The ocean is absorbing more than 90% of that extra heat. And hurricanes love warm ocean water. So we're making the oceans warmer, and we're then extending the hurricane season because we have warmer waters earlier and later in the year. At the same time, when water gets warmer, it actually takes up more space, it expands. And we have a lot of ice melt. So now we have warmer ocean and we have rising sea levels. So all that does is it just compounds the problem. As we move through this century, we're expecting that global warming caused by humans is actually going to make hurricanes more intense. And sea levels are undoubtedly rising. A lot of experts believe we could see at least 3 feet of sea level rise, maybe more, by the end of the century. So now imagine places on Long Island are already going to be underwater that are below 3 feet. So we're essentially remapping the coastline. Now when we get a hurricane coming in, the odds are it's going to be stronger, and we know with rising sea levels that the water's going to go further inland. So as we move through the rest of this century, when it becomes essentially a certainty somewhere in this 100-year time frame we're going to get hit with a major hurricane, we're now increasing the probability that it's going to be maybe a Category 4 instead of just a 3 like Katrina. And the waters are going to be higher, which means the waters are going to go farther and farther inland. So the places that are safe today from a Category 1 or 2 hurricane will not be safe for our grandchildren, for example. So that's a very concerning factor, that we're actually going to be shrinking the size of the island due to sea level rise, at the same time making hurricanes even stronger. So none of that bodes well for the Northeast and Long Island.
With all this said, this is not an apocalyptic outlook for Long Island. Rather, it is a wake-up call. It reminds us that we must educate ourselves on atmospheric conditions, what the qualifications are of the people who give us our forecast, what the forecast means, and what resources are available to the general public. To that end, Ross Dickman, the meteorologist in charge of the National Weather Service Forecast Office, covering the New York City metropolitan area, has more, including information for those who might want to enter this exciting, vital, and in-demand career of meteorology.
What is the official description of a meteorologist?
Well, we like to think of the definition of meteorologist as a science field that basically explains, understands, observes, and forecasts atmospheric phenomenon, and also understand its impacts. Most people think of the basic definition of a meteorologist as a person that predicts the weather.
And there's a lot of different branches of meteorology. Can you explain a few of them and what their duties are?
Sure. Here at the National Weather Service Forecast Office in New York, our role of meteorology typically is one of operations, meaning we are forecasting the weather 24/7, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we're here observing weather patterns that are going across the country and across the world, and helping the citizens of the New York area again understand and get a weather forecast. There are other fields of meteorology, such as research. NOAA has many agencies. One of them is the Office of Atmospheric Research, and one of the challenges that we have is getting meteorological research into the forecast operations.
Are all TV and radio weather personalities, are they all meteorologists?
Actually, there are several that are, and you'll always see the introduction. When you watch television and you watch the evening news, you'll see it'll say meteorologist and then their name. That way you know that they are meteorologists. Occasionally they can be certified too by folks that they can be a broadcaster, but have an understanding and pass a course that they can relay scientific and meteorological information to the general public. And so, yes, there are certified folks that are out there. Not everybody is a meteorologist.
Where can one obtain a degree in meteorology, and is it a growing field?
It is a growing field. We're actually graduating a lot of meteorologists. There's more and more every year. A lot of the major universities have bachelor's and master's and doctorates in meteorology. Several universities that we work with here, well, one of them is right up the road here at Stony Brook University on Long Island. We have a very close relationship with the folks there. And I personally went to the Pennsylvania State University out in State College, Pennsylvania.
Where are you located, and how long have you been recording weather conditions?
We are located on the grounds of Brookhaven National Laboratory here in eastern Long Island. We're about 70 miles east of New York City. And the National Weather Service has offices in every major city across the United States, and we cover Northeast New Jersey, New York City, Southeast New York, Southern Connecticut, and all of Long Island. We have been forecasting the weather here at Brookhaven National Lab since 1993, although the Brookhaven National Laboratory was here before the Weather Service office, and they've been accumulating records since 1949.
What is a typical day like here?
Well, it can be pretty crazy, actually. You come in, our mission is to protect lives and property, enhance the national economy. So when I walk in the door in the morning, one of the first things I want to do is determine what kind of hazards may be present that I'll have to deal with today, and actually out to 7 to 10 days. And what we do is we have a wonderful working relationship with the emergency managers and the media, and we like to convey and help them make decisions as to how they're going to handle a lot of these weather hazards as they approach the New York area. So when I walk in that door this morning, the first thing I want to do is see what those hazards are, and if I can identify a hazard in the local area, such as a severe thunderstorm threat, or God forbid we have a hurricane up in this area, we need to be able to communicate that information directly with emergency management and get the message out to the public. And certainly with the media, we have that relationship. They have the power to get the message out through mass media dissemination.
What type of equipment do you use?
Well, we have lots of equipment that we use. Our primary equipment that we use is satellite and radar imagery. But the forecast actually begins with observations. And we've got observing sensors located in just about everywhere. And it could be what we call an automated surface observing system. It could be a cooperative weather observer that's out in the field taking weather observations. We collect all that data here into the office. That goes down into a central computer system in Washington, and numerical forecast models are run on that data among other data coming in, and that comes back to us. We interpret that information and then make a forecast.
And who do you give your information to?
That our users actually are very diverse. We've got public, we've got marine, we've got aviation weather users, emergency management, forestry users. We could have wildfires as an example, and of course the media. The media, again, really does help us get the information out, and they're a very critical part of the process.
Are there research departments that will analyze past local atmospheric conditions and apply it to understanding and predicting future conditions?
Yes. The NOAA has several agencies within it, and we have the Office of Atmospheric Research that collects a lot of information and helps us, understand better the atmosphere and its impacts on the Earth and its people. And we also have the Climate Prediction Center that is collecting all this data, And climate is becoming very, very important to how we interact on a daily basis moving forward, and the impact to the earth and again the people. So the Climate Prediction Center plays a very critical role in the overall process for weather information, atmospheric information.
Can you explain how the various categories of hurricanes get their ratings?
The Saffir-Simpson scale was actually developed in the early 1970s from Saffir-Simpson, and they rank each of the hurricanes or tropical storms by category. Actually, it's the hurricane is by category. Once you have what we call a depression, that is the first part of what is the life cycle of a tropical system in the Atlantic. And winds of 39 miles per hour, once a system reaches that rating, it goes to a tropical storm. Once it reaches 74 miles per hour, it then becomes a Category 1 hurricane. And the National Hurricane Center in Miami, Florida, is assessing satellite imagery, aircraft observations. We call it reconnaissance aircraft. They're sending planes out, doing data sampling, and measuring the wind speeds in the system. And so these categories go up, Category 5 being the worst, where winds, once they reach 155 miles per hour, would be considered a catastrophic hurricane, or one that's capable of producing catastrophic damage in the United States or wherever it makes landfall. So have a plan, know what to do, listen during the tropical weather season.
Are residents going to heed the warnings early enough? And even if they do, because of the congestion around here, are we going to be able to get those people to safety soon enough?